Hello. Today I'm going to show you how to create a Kubernetes cluster using Weaveworks, WKSctl, and Footloose, which allows you to create virtual machines as Docker containers. So the first thing you want to do is you'll need to download Docker, Git, kubectl, and kubectl 114 to your machine. I've already done that on my machine here. And as you can see, I have no Docker containers running at the current moment. If I'd had anything running in Footloose, they would already have Docker containers running there. So what we're going to show you here is how you can use GitOps in order to create a cluster for Kubernetes using just a repo that you start with from Weaveworks. So that base Weaveworks repo is this repository called Weaveworks WKS Quick Start Firekube. What that's going to do is it's going to combine Footloose and optionally Ignite, depending on the platform you're running on, and WKSctl in order to build a cluster running locally on your machine. So I went ahead and already forked this repo, WKS Quick Start Firekube, into my own account on GitHub, and I cloned it into this directory here. So this is just an upstream repository version, and I've added my own workload in here, which is this pod info YAML file. So all I'm going to do, I already have Git installed and Docker, like I said before. I'm just going to run setup.sh. What that's going to do is download the tools that it needs in order to get your cluster running. The first thing it's going to download is JK, which is our config as code solution, which allows you to use TypeScript to create a configuration. So that's instead of using Helm or Customize, it's a much more condensed way and removes a lot of the duplication. So while this is off and running, you can see that right now I've created virtual machines already in Footloose and downloaded them and booted them, and I'm actually installing Kubernetes on those virtual machines right now. The way that Kubernetes gets installed using WKSctl is we build up the master machine, install all the Kubernetes version, and get that machine up and running. Then we configure a tool called Flux that is going to sync everything out of your repository here into the cluster itself, and then start an actuator that will make sure that the cluster matches what your configuration is, which is what GitOps is all about. So if we go over here while that's running and look at my repository, you can see that I have an additional pod info YAML file, and if we go ahead and take a look at that, this is just a workload of another application that we have built here at Weaveworks that allows you to have a simulated microservice application running in your Kubernetes cluster. So while this is running in the background here to create our cluster, we're just going to go ahead and pause the recording now, and I will come back as we get closer to having that cluster up and running. This will run for a few minutes when it's running. I am running on a Mac here, and so it is using Docker to do that. At this point, WKSctl has completed building the master node for our cluster, and it's set up a kubeconfig here that we can go ahead and start to interrogate our cluster and see what's running on it. So at this point now, I'm going to go ahead and do a kubectl command and take a look and see what's happening here. So we can see containers are being created. If I go ahead and make this wide, you'll see that everything is happening on node 0 right now while containers boot up. If we take a look at, when I mentioned before that we have Flux installed, you can see the Flux container here. What it's doing is once it's up and configured, which we have already configured using the WKSctl command, it will start syncing that pod info YAML file that I mentioned before into your cluster in order to go ahead and start getting it running. So as you can see now we're still at node 0, but we have a few more containers running and things are starting to come up. I mentioned before that we're running an actuator underneath the covers to make sure that the node is of the proper size. So for this particular example, we're creating a 2-node cluster. And if I take a look at the number of machines, these are actual machines from the cluster API. So WKSctl underneath the covers is running a cluster API actuator in order to make sure that the cluster size matches what's in your Git repo. So we should start to see some other nodes come up, but let's take a look. Take a look at, so we do have 2 machines now. Let's just go ahead and see if we have nodes up yet, if we've translated those into nodes. So we still only have a single node at this point. So while we're waiting for the pod info to start, because we need a node that is not tainted, so the master node is tainted and we can't run our custom workloads on it. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video for just another minute while this comes up. Our second node has joined the cluster. It's not quite ready to take on workloads yet, but it will be here shortly. So if we go ahead and get our pods again, we'll see if any of them have started on the second node. We do have the kube proxy running on the second node, and we have WeaveNet running on the second node. But our pod info is not quite ready. Class is not, or service is not ready to run just yet. Now I see both my nodes are running. Let's get our pods here. Those aren't started just yet, but they will be. And once they do, I'm going to go ahead and set up a port forward inside of Kubernetes so that we can access our web application. So now that those are running, I'm going to go ahead and port forward here. So if I jump over here to here and I try again, and now you'll see that my pod info class is up and running, and this allows you to ping back and forth between the different instances of your pod info class that you have running here. So I mentioned before that this is all running within virtualized machines on Docker. So if I do a Docker PS here, you notice that we have 2 Footloose machines that are actually running. So all of this is a self-contained Kubernetes instance running locally on my Macintosh, all by issuing that one command in the setup.sh for the WKS Quick Start Firekube example. Thanks so much for listening. Bye.